But who are the Christians? What makes one a Christian? As I was thinking about this, I came across this illustration in my mind. Any of you ever packed a suitcase? Have any of you ever gotten someplace and opened the suitcase you packed to find out that what you put in the suitcase is not in the suitcase? You know the only reason when you get somewhere and you open the suitcase and what you put in the suitcase is not in the suitcase because it's not your suitcase. What is it that God has packed into the believer that can never mistake you for somebody else's suitcase? Because there's only two who can be packing the suitcase of your life: Jesus and everybody else. What is it that Jesus at the new birth did in your inner man so that you become the suitcase of God wherever you travel, that whenever you are opened up by God, whatever God packed in there comes out? Y'all ready now? Let's look at the suitcase. Let's unpack the suitcase. He says in verse 2, to the church of God which is at Corinth. You say, Pastor, big deal, move on. Nope, slow your roll. Because here's one of the problems of a church in a crisis culture. Here's one of the problems of the church today in America. We don't know who the church belonged to. We don't know and understand who came up with the ideal of church. That's why we got black church, white church, we got Presbyterian church, we got Baptist church, we got Independent, Fundamental, Full Gospel. We got all these churches. They don't look nothing like what God said the church is supposed to look. Because men have taken from God what belongs to God. Now, we're not shocked by that if we know our Bibles. Satan is a counterfeiter. If God's got a church, Satan want to have a church. And if God is making disciples, Satan want to make disciples. Y'all ain't praying with me. And that's why you can have wheat and tare in the same church. You can have saved and unsaved in the same church. You can have believers and non-believers in the same church. Because God's trying to build his church, Satan trying to come along and piggyback on God because he can't create nothing, he can only borrow from God. So our first attribute is that God is the originator of the church. The church is God's ideal. The church did not come into existence until the day of Pentecost. And it's a multi-ethnic church from Jump Street. It's a multi-gender, there's only two. You got to say that these days. Male and female, both are welcome. It has all kinds of generations in the church. Young, old, middle-aged, youth, children, babies. The church is a called out assembly, but it's called out by God. The church is God's ideal, not man's. But here's what Satan has most of us. He's got us tripping so much on men that we forget that God is the originator of the church. Just like Satan slithered into the garden in Genesis chapter 3 to mess it up, he's been slithering into whatever God has designed since then. And so people get disillusioned with church because they expect the church to be perfect. It's not perfect. It's being perfected. But they don't want to acknowledge there's an enemy who's in the garden trying to mess the thing up. That he sows some of his disciples in the church. They hurt your feelings. They do you wrong. And then you mad at all Christians. Them Christians. They say one thing and do another. No, you found one of the messed up ones. You found someone who was working for the devil. And because you don't know what's supposed to be in the suitcase that God packed, they got you all tripped out. Now, it's not that we who are saved can't do wrong, but when we do wrong, we make it right. That's how you can tell one suitcase from another. That's how you can tell someone who's professing to be something and one who really possesses what they are. Because the suitcase can look the same sometimes. That's why they tell you at the airport, be careful to check to make sure it's your suitcase, because some of the suitcases look similar. So that's why some of y'all put bows on your suitcase and you put markers on your suitcase. You go buy an outlandish suitcase that you ain't never seen nobody, so you can make sure you don't make any mistake. How come we don't do that in church? We're more able to discern suitcases than we are Christians.